Today on Ag News, we're talking about assessing your feedlots and also animal health. So stay tuned, we'll be right back. Today we're going to be talking about some of the feedlots and what we should be looking at in the feedlot, Steve. What's our recommendations about feedlots? Go ahead there. We've got lots of information to look at.
Absolutely. This assessing, that's a big word. What does it mean? Mm-hmm. Well, there's a commitment by the beef cattle industry to provide a positive eating experience for people, and also have how the animals are raised. So define quality. Well, for some people, it's how it's tasting. But for other people, it's just as important. How are they raised?
Yeah.
How are they treated? This is just an example in Google. How many people put in that word cattle welfare, livestock welfare, and look at those thousands, millions of hits. So people are interested in how these animals are treated by beef cattle producers. So a group of producers, meat industry representatives, and various people decided there was a need to do assessments of feed yards. Now, this can be a self-assessment. You can go out and do it yourself on how you're raising your cattle. It can be voluntary. This material that I'm talking about is available at bqa.org, and this procedure, you can do it yourself, or you can have somebody come in and another set of eyes and look at this. And here it is. This is free. You can download it from bqa.org. And there are some large cattle feeding companies. They're doing this on a regular basis.
Now, does these feedlots, do they have to be inspected? Do they have to get a certification from the BQA or anything? Or is this just kind of voluntary?
This is voluntary, although if let's say you're feeding cattle for a big company, they may be sending people out to double check on how you're treating the animals.
Okay, good.
But this is, once again, this was created by beef producers, various companies that are interested in selling beef to consumers, just because of an interest. There's basic guidelines. It's what's the feed look like? Is it a proper quality? How are you're working with your veterinarian and the veterinary feed directive, making sure we're using the feeds correctly? And I put down there, kind of in yellow, care and handling practices and BQA code of how you're doing cattle care. So maybe the beef producers not necessarily excited about doing an assessment, but if you're going to do an assessment, try to do it on a normal day, especially if you're going to have somebody else come in and do the assessment. I'm not sure I want to show up when we've just a big rain came through or something like that. We're not going to catch you at a normal situation. So schedule it when things are normal, or if you're going to do the assessment. Biosecurity, if you're going to have somebody else come in and look at your operation, make sure they've got clean clothes, the truck's clean. You don't want to bring anything in if you're going to do an assessment for somebody else. And once again, normal conditions. There you see there's a tornado starting to come in on a feed yard. Not a good time to do an assessment.
Probably not.
And then choosing pens for the assessment. Some of those yards out in the high plains, they're going to have, I don't know how many pens, several, could be 100 pens. You don't do them all, maybe 10 pens. Now here in Ohio, the average cattle feeder may have 1, 2, 3 pens. Maybe. You're going to evaluate all those pens on how they're being treated and the pen itself. This is a busy slide, and we're not going to dwell on it, but there you see abuse and neglect. That assessment, they're going to be looking for that. If there's a representative representation of animals that are not being treated correctly. Residue avoidance, we don't want that anything in the meat. What are your procedures for minimizing any sort of residue? Withdrawal periods on animals if they've been treated with something. Well, once again, this is a very busy slide, but I'm just trying to show how comprehensive an assessment can be. Also, do you know how to provide euthanasia? Euthanasia is a Greek term, means good death. That means minimize pain and suffering. The old term is, well, shoot them between the eyes. That is a fatal shot, but it's not euthanasia. The animal will suffer. If you think about where the brain's located, it's above the eyes. And this diagram shows if you're going to administer euthanasia to an animal that's not going to get better, proper location of where you administer the shot.
Now, obviously, this is a question for that. Is all cattle breeds about the same?
Yes.
Could some be a little, so the location would be about the same on all breeds?
The general rule is the line. You take a line from the edge of the eye and go to where the horn is, or where on dehorned cattle or polled cattle, where it would be. So it's rather high on the head. Horses kind of the same way.
Okay, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
Well, they also, in an assessment, you assess the animals while you're working them in the corral. And these are some of the things we look at. Electric prod. If you use it more than 10% of the time, that's too much. That is too much. How many animals fell? Is there stumbled or tripped? Did they vocalize before the procedure? These are things that we're just trying to detect stress in these animals. And so these are general guidelines that are in this feed yard assessment. And I might hasten to add, we're talking about feedlot, but the same assessment tools exist for cow-calf operations, stocker operators, so it looks a lot like this. But so they did that based on the feed yard. This was the first assessment done. You can go to bqa.org and get that material.
Another question, and we talked in one of our previous sessions about transportation. Is there such a checkout form for transportation? Say if the cattle get on the truck, what are they like versus when they get off of the truck? Does someone look at that, or I don't know? I'm just trying to think of, well, you know, maybe there's a way to eliminate bad handlers, if there is, you know, if that's the case, or maybe, you know, maybe that's why they're coming in not well, or maybe more bruised, like we talked in the past.
That is being developed, but I also hasten to add it's already in certain, a group called PACO evaluates feed yards. They're looking at how often that hot shot's being used. So yeah, there are tools out there, whether somebody agrees or disagree, this is happening to evaluate somebody that's mishandling animals.
Good, okay.
This is just, once again, this is the chart somebody would be using. If you're working cattle at the feedlot and somebody's watching you, or you're writing down for yourself, they're watching you, how often, electric prod, the animal's following, and this is just the tool they use. This is some data by Temple Grandin, a faculty member out at Colorado State University, just showing that stress is real. The bottom line is antelope. And then you look at cattle there, baseline. This is cortisol. This is hormone of stress. So the more cortisol, the more the cattle are stressed. So cattle baseline there at the bottom. And then look at the top, beef cattle, rough handling, excessive use of electric prods. Those animals are getting stressed. You know, and it's interesting, the numbers are small, but there's somebody capturing deer and tranquilizing, and the numbers are higher for cattle. So we can cause this stress. And we have to realize animals, cattle look at the world differently. I often ask in my presentations, what's the shape of a pupil for these animals? It's not round like ours, it's a rectangle. This is actually a head of a goat. It's harder to see in cattle, but it's the same. They have just a rectangle for a pupil.
Interesting.
Then they can see a lot. They have panoramic vision, and cattle can see about 310 degrees. You and I about 180. But they can see a lot They can't judge distance, though, so they have challenges with that. Distance. So you have to walk slowly because they don't know how far away or how near things are. Well, we also, that's about the animals. We look at where the animals are being maintained. Once again, I talked about 10 pens in a big feed yard, less than 10, you evaluate them all. You look at the stocking rate. Can the animals lay down? Is there a place they can get out of the mud, even if it is muddy? Is water accessible? Is it clean? And are the feed bunks where they're getting their feed, is that accessible? Is it clean? Are they doing good bunk management? We also, packers are definitely interested in this. What do the cattle look like most of the time when that assessment's being done? But packers, they're not in love with that animal, that top picture. If any mud touches the meat, they have to cut that away. So that's hard to do with an animal like that. So that's why pen surface management. Are you scraping? Once again, are you getting water off the pen? Can it drain away to minimize the mud? The feed manager needs to take care of some of those things. Here's just an example. There's some standing water there. That is a manageable situation to get rid of that, to minimize some of that stuff that gets stuck to the hide.
Because obviously, when the cattle gets in line to go through the processing, they don't go through a bath, do they?
No, they don't.
So whatever's on them is going to be straight in there. It's not like driving them through a car wash before they before it's time to do their thing. So obviously, taking care of your land and making sure that all of those are a necessity. So
absolutely. This is just a diagram showing if you have a dirt lot. There's different densities of soil, so you want to just take off the manure layer. That manure soil layer, that's fairly compact. It's compressed. And then compacted soil, it's never been disturbed. You want to leave those surfaces right there, those bottom layers. That prevents water or contaminants getting down into groundwater. So it's an environmental issue beyond even just the mud situation. I often talk about how deep do you go. I'll push a pen or a pencil down into that stuff, and once I feel resistance, I leave that.
That's where you need to be.
That's where you need to stop on your scraping. Admittedly, if you've got a concrete lot, that's going to take care of a lot of issues as well. This is just, once again, a busy slide, but here's mud score. We're coming back to how muddy are those cattle. So in that assessment, we've kind of already talked about that. And this is just the assessment tool looking at the pens, how muddy they are, is water accessible, feed bunk accessible, so they look at that. And truck loading chute, what does it look like? Is there too much slope? Cattle can only go up not very steep slope. So a maximum of about 25 degrees. So if you have something steeper than that, think about changing it so the animals don't fall and they don't have bruising on them because of that situation. And overall, we're just looking at the facilities, how they're in good working order, looking at the handling facilities. Things aren't in improper order. Are there protocols? This is just saying, okay, you've got employees, you give them instructions now, and certainly verbal is important, but have it written down so they understand who's in charge, this is what happens. And these are just, also this is an emergency action sheet. If there's an emergency, if there's a fire, do they know who to call? What's the procedures? What is the procedure? So we have an expectation that that's common sense to have those numbers in an area that everybody can see them rapidly. And so this is, once again, if people are interested in doing assessments for cow-calf operations, stocker, or feedlot, they can go to bqa.org and download this material for free.
That's real good information. And like you said, it's still voluntary, but it's probably a good idea to try to follow some of these procedures.
It is, and once again, there are some branded companies selling branded product. They have expectations of this being done.
Great. Okay. Well, Steve, I know we've got lots of other topics we're going to talk about, so we'll be back with another topic on cow-calf information. So stay tuned.